the underground cities remain, some still inhabited, others waiting in darkness for rediscovery. They stand as monuments to human adaptability and human hope, to our capacity to create beauty and meaning even in the most challenging circumstances, to our understanding that survival requires not just strength but depth, not just innovation but preservation, not just the courage to build upward toward our dreams, but the wisdom to build downward toward our foundations. In the end, the underground teaches us that we are both deeper and more resilient than we usually dare to believe, that beneath the surface of our ordinary lives lie vast networks of possibility, that the most important aspects of human existence often happen in spaces that cannot be seen, and that sometimes the only way to reach the light is to first find the courage to descend into the darkness, knowing that in those depths we join a tradition that stretches back to the very beginning of human consciousness. The recognition that we are creatures of earth as well as air, of depth as well as height, of the hidden as well as the visible, and that our greatest treasures are often buried in places where only the most patient and determined seekers will ever learn to look. Have you ever paused on a quiet evening and wondered what lies beneath your feet? Beneath the familiar ground you walk upon every day? Beneath the concrete and asphalt of our modern world? There, in the darkness below, exists an entirely different realm, a forgotten world that has sheltered humanity for millennia, yet remains largely invisible to our surface-dwelling eyes. If you enjoy mysteries that blur the line between history and legend, consider subscribing for more explorations into the hidden corners of our world, because tonight we descend into the depths of time itself, where stone corridors whisper ancient secrets and carved chambers hold the echoes of civilizations that chose to build downward rather than up. Imagine, for a moment, the layers beneath us. Not just soil and rock, but layers of human story. Layers of survival, faith, fear, and perhaps even forgotten knowledge. Picture vast networks of tunnels stretching beneath desert sands, mountain ranges, and bustling cities. Chambers carved with patient hands, ventilation shafts that have drawn breath for 1,000 years, and passageways that connect not just rooms, but entire epochs of human experience. These are not merely holes in the ground or simple caves of convenience. These are deliberate creations, architectural marvels that required generations to complete. Underground cities that could house populations larger than many modern towns. They represent something profound about human nature. Our instinct to burrow, to hide, to preserve, and perhaps most mysteriously, our desire to keep certain things away from the light of day. As we journey together through these subterranean worlds, we'll discover that the underground has always been more than a place of refuge. It has been a canvas for humanity's deepest beliefs, most desperate struggles, and most enduring mysteries. From the mythical realms of ancient gods to the very real stone cities that still exist beneath our feet, the underground tells a story that is both darker and more wondrous than anything we see on the surface. The earliest whispers of underground realms emerge not from archaeology, but from the collective memory of our species, encoded in myths and legends that span every culture, every continent, every age of human storytelling. Long before we had words for geology or architecture. Our ancestors spoke of worlds beneath the world, realms where gods dwelt in darkness, where the dead journeyed after life, and where sometimes the living went to seek wisdom or escape catastrophe. In ancient Greece, poets sang of Hades, not merely a god, but a place, a vast underground kingdom, where rivers flowed in eternal darkness, and where the souls of mortals wandered through fields of ashes. The Greeks described this realm with such vivid detail that one might wonder if their poets had glimpsed something real. Caverns so deep that sound itself seemed to die. Passages that twisted like the thoughts of the dreaming. Chambers where time moved differently than it did above. Mesopotamian tablets, carved in cuneiform, thousands of years before the Greeks, speak of similar depths. The Mesopotamians called it the House of Dust, a place beneath the earth where gods and spirits ruled over shadows, where the living could journey if they possessed the courage and knowledge to navigate its treacherous paths. These were not simple stories of death and afterlife. They were maps of inner and outer worlds, guides to spaces that existed both in imagination and, perhaps, in reality across the Pacific. Indigenous peoples of the Americas carried their own traditions of emergence from underground realms. The Hopi speak of previous worlds that existed beneath this one, connected by passages through which their ancestors climbed to reach the surface. The Pueblo peoples tell of Sipapu, sacred openings in the earth that connect our world to the worlds below. These are not tales of the dead, but stories of origin, suggesting that humanity itself emerged from the depths, carrying with it the memory of vast spaces carved in stone and illuminated by fires that never died. In Hindu and Buddhist traditions, the underground becomes Patala, a realm of serpent kings and hidden wisdom, where Nagas guard treasures both material and spiritual. Norse mythology speaks of roots that penetrate deep into the earth, connecting the world tree to wells of knowledge and fate. Celtic legends whisper of she-mounds, hills that conceal entrances to other worlds, where time flows like honey and mortals can lose centuries in what feels like a single day. What unites all these stories across cultures and continents is a persistent belief that the underground is not empty space, but a place of power, knowledge, and transformation. Perhaps these myths carry within them the genetic memory of our ancestors' actual experiences in underground shelters, the echoes of times when survival itself depended on the ability to disappear beneath the surface, to become invisible to predators, invaders, or natural disasters that swept across the world above. The myths prepare us for something extraordinary. Because, as we move from legend into documented history, we discover that the underground cities of human imagination pale in comparison to the underground cities that human hands actually built. And nowhere is this more dramatically illustrated than in the volcanic landscape of Cappadocia, where an entire civilization chose to live beneath the earth. Daring Q. The name itself sounds like an incantation, a word that opens doorways into impossibility. Located in central Turkey, beneath a landscape that appears desolate and unremarkable from above, lies one of the most astounding architectural achievements in human history, a city carved entirely from volcanic rock, descending 18 levels into the earth, deep enough to shelter 20,000 people along with their livestock, their grain stores, their workshops, and their places of worship. Walking through Q today, or rather, crawling, since many of the passages were deliberately built too low for invaders to move through quickly. One encounters not a crude shelter, but a sophisticated urban environment. The builders created a ventilation system so advanced that fresh air reaches even the deepest levels. They carved wells that tap into underground water sources. They built wine cellars, stables, chapels, and meeting halls. They even created schools where children could learn in complete safety, never seeing sunlight until they were old enough to understand the dangers of the world above. But Q is not alone. Throughout Cappadocia, archaeologists have discovered over 200 underground cities, connected by tunnels that stretch for miles beneath the earth. Kamakli, another massive complex, could house 15,000 people, as Karnak contained booby traps and defensive systems that would make a modern military engineer pause in admiration. These were not temporary hideouts, but permanent alternative civilizations, complete societies that existed in parallel to the world above ground. The engineering involved in creating these cities staggers the imagination. The builders had to solve problems of air circulation, water management, waste disposal, and structural integrity that would challenge modern architects. They carved spaces large enough for communal gatherings and intimate enough for private family life. They created storage systems that could preserve food for months or years of siege. They built defensive mazes that could confuse and trap invaders who managed to find the hidden entrances. Yet, perhaps the most haunting aspect of these underground cities is not their complexity, but their silence about why they were built. The people who carved them left no written records explaining their purpose. No inscriptions describing the threats they faced or the hopes they harbored. The cities themselves are the only testimony to whatever drove thousands of people to spend their lives in voluntary darkness, emerging only when necessary, living their entire existence in spaces where the sun never shone and the seasons never changed. Some historians suggest they were built to escape Arab raids in the 7th and 8th centuries. Others point to earlier Roman persecutions of Christian communities. But the cities show evidence of construction and habitation spanning many centuries, suggesting that whatever drove people underground was not a single threat. Perhaps it was simply the recognition that the surface world, for all its beauty and promise, was ultimately unreliable, that safety and continuity required a place apart from the chaos of nations and armies and the unpredictable violence of human ambition. Standing in the deepest chambers of Q, surrounded by stone walls that have protected secrets for over a millennium. One cannot help but wonder what other knowledge was preserved in these depths. What books were copied by candlelight in chambers far below the reach of conquering armies? What conversations took place in these halls when the surface world burned with war and persecution? What prayers were whispered in chapels, where the only light came from oil lamps that reflected off carved crosses and ancient symbols whose meanings we can now only guess? The underground cities of Cappadocia reveal something profound about human adaptability and determination. But they also connect us to an even older tradition, the use of underground spaces not just for survival, but for the preservation of the sacred, for the practice of faith in times when faith itself was dangerous. and for the creation of sanctuaries where the soul could find refuge, even when the body could not. Beneath the streets of Rome, in a network of tunnels that stretches for hundreds of miles, lie the catacombs. Vast underground cemeteries where early Christians buried their dead and gathered in secret to practice their forbidden faith. These subterranean chambers, carved from volcanic tuff, served as more than mere burial grounds. They were meeting places, churches, art galleries, and repositories of belief that sustained a persecuted community through centuries of imperial hostility. The catacombs reveal a different relationship with the underground than we see in Cappadocia. Here, the living came to commune with the dead, to remember martyrs whose bones lay wrapped in linen in wall niches, to celebrate the Eucharist in chambers decorated with some of the earliest Christian art ever created. The walls of these underground sanctuaries bloom with frescoes depicting biblical scenes, symbols of faith, and portraits of believers whose names have been lost, but whose faces still gaze out from stone alcoves with expressions of serene confidence. In these depths, surrounded by the dead, the early Christians found not horror but hope. The underground became a place where the boundary between this world and the next seemed permeable. Where the living could feel the presence of those who had died for their beliefs. Where communion with the divine felt more immediate than it ever did in the bright, dangerous world above. The catacombs were not places of hiding, but places of gathering. Not tombs, but temples. Not refuges from faith, but refuges for faith. This tradition of underground sanctuaries extends far beyond Rome. In Ethiopia, the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela transform the earth itself into a cathedral, carved downward into volcanic rock. These churches exist not as buildings rising toward heaven, but as spaces that descend into the earth, creating a kind of architectural prayer that reaches toward the divine by going deeper rather than higher. The most famous of these, the Church of St. George, stands as a perfect Greek cross, carved entirely below ground level, its roof flush with the earth, making it invisible to casual observers, but creating an interior space of breathtaking beauty and acoustic perfection. In China, Buddhist monks carved the Longmen grottos, creating tens of thousands of statues and religious inscriptions in limestone cliffs. In India, the Ajanta and Ellora caves preserve centuries of religious art and architecture carved directly into mountainsides. From the underground monasteries of Cappadocia to the cave churches of Romania, from the subterranean synagogues of Eastern Europe to the hidden temples of Tibet, humanity has consistently chosen to carve sacred spaces into the earth itself. These underground sanctuaries share common characteristics that transcend religious and cultural boundaries. They offer protection from persecution and destruction. They create acoustic environments that transform prayer and chant into something otherworldly. They provide spaces for contemplation removed from the distractions of surface life. And perhaps most importantly, they establish a physical connection between the worshipper and the deeper mysteries of existence. Descending into the earth becomes a metaphor for descending into the depths of spiritual experience, where the superficial concerns of daily life fall away and the essential questions of meaning and purpose can be confronted in darkness and silence. But underground spaces have served humanity not only as places of worship and community, but as theaters of conflict and survival, as humanity's ultimate answer to the violence and chaos that periodically sweep across the surface world. And in times of war, the underground becomes not a place of choice, but a place of necessity. During World War II, as bombs fell on London, night after night, thousands of citizens descended into the underground. The subway system became a vast shelter where families spread blankets on platform floors and tried to sleep through the thunder of explosions overhead. Children were born in these tunnels. Elderly people died there. Entire communities formed around the rhythm of the trains and the shared experience of survival. The London Underground, built for transportation, became a symbol of resilience, proving once again that when the surface world becomes uninhabitable, human life finds a way to continue in the depths. In Vietnam, the Siu Chi tunnels represent perhaps the most extensive underground war ever fought. A network of passages stretching over 250 kilometers. These tunnels housed not just soldiers, but entire communities that lived underground for years. The tunnels contained hospitals, schools, theaters, workshops, and meeting halls. They had multiple levels, with living quarters, storage areas, and defensive positions built to withstand bombing and chemical attacks. The people who lived in Siu Chi created an entire parallel society beneath the earth, emerging only at night to tend crops and gather intelligence, disappearing back into the earth before dawn. The Siu Chi tunnels reveal something remarkable about human adaptability. Faced with an enemy that controlled the skies and possessed overwhelming technological superiority, the Vietnamese forces chose to disappear into the earth itself. They fought a war not of advances and retreats, but of appearances and disappearances, of being present and absent simultaneously. The underground became their weapon, their fortress, and their home, a place where they could preserve their culture and continue their resistance even when the surface world was consumed by violence. In Eastern Europe, during the Holocaust, underground spaces became the difference between life and death for thousands of people. In cities like Warsaw and Lviv, created false walls and secret passages, carved shelters in sewer systems and abandoned buildings. These were not planned cities like during Q, but desperate improvisations, spaces carved by people who had no choice but to disappear from the surface world or face annihilation. The stories that emerge from these wartime underground spaces speak to something profound about human nature. When faced with circumstances that make surface life impossible, people do not simply surrender. They adapt, they improvise, they create new forms of community and survival. They prove that civilization is not dependent on cities and governments and the visible structures of society, but on the human capacity to maintain connection, hope, and dignity even in the darkest circumstances. From the siege tunnels of medieval castles to the bomb shelters of the Cold War, from the partisan hideouts of occupied territories to the fallout shelters of suburban neighborhoods, the underground has always been humanity's insurance policy against catastrophe, a place to preserve not just life, but the possibility of renewal. A space where survivors can wait for the storm to pass and then emerge to rebuild the world above. Yet, as we trace this pattern of retreat and survival, of descent and preservation, we encounter stories that push beyond documented history into realms of speculation and wonder. tales of underground civilizations that have never emerged, of knowledge preserved in chambers so deep and so hidden that they remain undiscovered, of possibilities that challenge our understanding of what lies beneath our feet and what might lie within human potential itself. Throughout history, explorers, mystics, and visionaries have spoken of civilizations that exist not on the surface of the earth but within it, entire worlds that thrive in vast caverns, sustained by technologies and wisdom that the surface world has forgotten or never possessed. These are not mere myths, but persistent traditions that appear in cultures around the globe, each describing underground realms with remarkable consistency and detail. The legend of Agartha speaks of a vast underground kingdom that stretches beneath much of Asia, inhabited by beings who possess advanced knowledge of science, philosophy, and spiritual development. According to these traditions, Agartha is not a refuge from the surface world, but an alternative to it, a civilization that chose long ago to develop inward rather than outward, downward rather than upward, preserving ancient wisdom while the surface world pursued power and material progress. Tibetan traditions describe Shambhala, a hidden kingdom that exists either in remote valleys or in underground realms, accessible only to those who have achieved certain levels of spiritual development. Shambhala is said to be a place where knowledge is preserved, not in books, but in living tradition. Where the deepest secrets of human potential are maintained by teachers who appear on the surface world only when humanity faces its greatest crises, where time itself moves differently, allowing inhabitants to work on projects that span centuries or millennia. These legends persist because they answer a deep human intuition that we have lost something essential in our rush toward technological progress, that somewhere, somehow, there must be preserves of older wisdom, places where the knowledge that truly matters has been kept safe from the wars, destructions, and forgettings that characterize surface history. The underground becomes a metaphor for the unconscious mind of humanity itself, the place where our deepest insights are stored, waiting to be rediscovered when we have learned to look in the right places. But speculation about hidden civilizations must be balanced against the very real discoveries that continue to emerge from underground excavations around the world. In Turkey, archaeologists recently discovered Gezimir, an underground city that may be even larger than Derinku. In Malta, the hypogeum of Halsaflini reveals a Neolithic underground temple complex of stunning sophistication. In Peru, extensive tunnel systems beneath Cusco and other ancient cities suggest that the Inca Empire had underground dimensions that Spanish chroniclers never documented. Each new discovery raises more questions than it answers. Why did so many ancient civilizations choose to build elaborate underground complexes? What knowledge or practices required such secrecy and protection? How many more underground sites remain undiscovered, hidden beneath layers of soil and centuries of forgetting? And perhaps most intriguingly, if ancient peoples possessed the engineering skills to create these marvels, what other technologies might they have developed that we have not yet rediscovered? The possibility that advanced knowledge has been preserved in underground libraries and laboratories is not merely wishful thinking. The Library of Alexandria was destroyed, but scholars believe that many of its texts were copied and hidden in remote monasteries and underground archives. The destruction of the Baghdad House of Wisdom scattered Islamic scholarship, but traditions suggest that core texts were preserved in hidden locations. Throughout history, whenever surface civilizations faced destruction, their most precious knowledge was often moved underground, protected in caves, buried in sealed chambers, or entrusted to secret societies that guarded it through dark ages. Modern archaeology continues to reveal that our ancestors were far more sophisticated than we previously imagined. The precision of megalithic construction, the complexity of ancient astronomical calculations, the advanced understanding of acoustics and geometry demonstrated in sacred sites around the world, all suggest that ancient civilizations possessed knowledge that was systematically recorded and preserved. And if such knowledge was preserved, where would be more logical to hide it than in the one place that conquering armies rarely explored? The depths of the earth itself. Whether or not vast underground civilizations actually exist, the legends themselves reveal something important about human psychology. Our intuition that the most important aspects of life are often hidden from casual observation. That wisdom requires depth rather than surface brilliance. That the solutions to humanity's greatest challenges might lie not in new innovations, but in the rediscovery of insights that our ancestors preserved in places we have forgotten how to find. As we contemplate the possibility of hidden knowledge and lost civilizations, we return inevitably to the present moment, to the reality of underground worlds that exist beneath our own feet, to the vast networks of tunnels, chambers, and passages that support and extend our modern cities in ways that most surface dwellers never realize, and to the recognition that our contemporary desire to build downward reflects the same impulses that drove our ancestors to carve cities from living rock beneath Montreal. A vast underground network connects shopping centers, hotels, office buildings, and metro stations in a climate-controlled environment that allows residents to live, work, and travel without ever experiencing Canadian winter. The Rizzo network spans over 200 connected buildings and contains shops, restaurants, museums, and entertainment venues that serve hundreds of thousands of people daily. It represents a modern version of the underground cities of Cappadocia, a parallel civilization that exists below the surface, complete with its own geography, culture, and rhythm of life. Beijing's underground city, built during the Cold War as a nuclear shelter, extends 4 miles beneath the Chinese capital. Originally designed to house millions of people in case of atomic attack, it now serves as a subterranean district of shops, restaurants, and living spaces. Like the ancient underground cities, it demonstrates humanity's persistent belief that safety and continuity require spaces removed from the chaos and vulnerability of surface existence. In New York, the subway system represents more than transportation. It is an underground ecosystem that supports thousands of people who live permanently in its tunnels and abandoned stations. It contains hidden levels, forgotten chambers, and sealed passages that urban explorers spend lifetimes trying to map. The subway has its own weather, its own wildlife, its own social structures, and unwritten laws. It is a world within a world, as complex and mysterious as any ancient underground city. Paris contains not only its famous metro system, but miles of catacombs, abandoned quarries, and forgotten tunnels that honeycomb the earth beneath the city. Of light, urban explorers speak of vast chambers decorated with graffiti that spans centuries, of underground rivers that flow through halls never touched by sunlight, of spaces so deep and so extensive that no complete map exists. The underground Paris is said to be as large and complex as the surface city, a mirror metropolis that reflects the history of the city above, while maintaining its own distinct character and secrets. London's underground extends far beyond the famous tube system. Beneath the city lie Roman foundations, medieval crypts, Victorian sewers, World War II bunkers, and modern utility tunnels that create a layered archaeological record stretching back over 2 millennia. Each era of London's history left its mark not only on the surface but in the depths, creating an underground museum where the past is preserved in stone and steel, brick and bone. These modern underground cities reveal that the human impulse to build downward has not diminished with technological progress. If anything, it has intensified. As surface land becomes more expensive and more crowded, as climate change makes surface environments more unpredictable, as urban populations grow beyond the capacity of traditional city planning, the underground offers space for expansion that does not consume agricultural land or natural habitats. It provides protection from extreme weather, from air pollution, from the noise and stress of surface traffic. It creates opportunities for community and commerce that exist outside the conventional patterns of urban life. But modern underground development also reveals something deeper about human psychology. Our continued attraction to spaces that are hidden, protected, and separate from the mainstream flow of society. Even in an age of global communication and constant connectivity, we seek places where we can disappear, where we can create alternative communities, where we can live according to different rules and rhythms than those that govern the surface world. That the underground continues to serve as humanity's unconscious mind, the place where we store our deepest fears and most persistent hopes, where we retreat when the surface world becomes too demanding or too dangerous, where we preserve the aspects of ourselves that require darkness and silence to flourish, and where we conduct the experiments in living that may eventually transform how all of humanity chooses to exist. Yet, for all the practical reasons that draw people underground, protection from weather, escape from persecution, preservation of knowledge, expansion of living space, there remains something more mysterious about our relationship with subterranean environments, something that touches on fundamental aspects of human psychology and reaches into the deepest chambers of our collective unconscious. The underground exerts a strange fascination on the human mind. It represents both safety and danger, shelter and entrapment, wisdom and madness. In dreams, descent often symbolizes a journey into the unconscious, an exploration of repressed memories and hidden desires. In literature, underground spaces serve as settings for transformation, initiation, and the confrontation with shadow aspects of the self. From Dante's journey through the circles of hell to Alice's fall down the rabbit hole, from the underground rivers of Coleridge's Kubla Khan to the subway tunnels of urban fantasy, Descent into the earth parallels descent into the mysteries of consciousness itself. Psychologists have noted that underground environments affect human behavior in profound ways. The absence of natural light alters circadian rhythms and can trigger both creativity and melancholy. The silence and darkness of deep spaces induces meditative states and can facilitate access to unconscious material. The sense of being surrounded by earth and stone creates feelings of both security and confinement that echo the earliest experiences of human life. In the womb, in caves, in the arms of protective parents. The underground also represents humanity's relationship with death and the passage of time. Burial practices across cultures consistently place the dead beneath the earth, creating an association between downward movement and the transition from life to whatever lies beyond life. Underground spaces become liminal zones where the boundary between life and death, between past and present, between the known and the unknown, becomes permeable. In these depths, people report experiences of timelessness, of communion with ancestors, of access to knowledge that seems to come from outside ordinary consciousness. Perhaps this is why underground spaces have always been associated with initiation and transformation. Mystery schools in ancient Greece, Egypt, and other civilizations often included descent into underground chambers as part of their teachings. Candidates would spend time in darkness and silence, confronting their fears and limitations, before emerging with expanded understanding of themselves and their place in the cosmos. The underground journey became a metaphor for the process of psychological and spiritual development, a necessary descent into the depths of the self before authentic wisdom could be attained. Modern psychology recognizes similar patterns in therapeutic work. The process of healing often requires what therapists call going underground, exploring the hidden chambers of memory and emotion where traumatic experiences are stored, confronting the shadow aspects of personality that have been banished from conscious awareness. The underground of the psyche, like the underground of the earth, contains both treasures and dangers, both the raw materials for growth and the dragons that guard the gates of transformation. The fascination with underground spaces may also reflect a deep human intuition about the nature of consciousness itself. If the mind has depths that extend far below the surface of ordinary awareness, if knowledge and wisdom can be stored in unconscious layers that we rarely access, if our most important insights emerge not from rational analysis, but from depths we cannot directly control, then perhaps the underground serves as a perfect metaphor for the hidden dimensions of human potential. Standing in the depths of an ancient underground city, or walking through the tunnels of a modern subway system, one cannot escape the feeling that these spaces mirror something essential about the human condition. We are surface creatures who carry within us vast underground territories. We live our daily lives in the light of ordinary consciousness while remaining largely unaware of the complex systems and hidden connections that support and sustain our existence. We speak confidently about what we know, while remaining humble about the immensity of what we do not know and may never know. The underground teaches us that depth matters more than surface area, that the most important things in life are often invisible. that safety and wisdom require foundations that extend far below the level of obvious observation. It reminds us that we are part of a larger mystery that includes not only the earth beneath our feet, but the unfathomable depths of consciousness, creativity, and connection that make human life meaningful. As our journey through the underground worlds draws toward its conclusion, the various threads of myth and history, archaeology and psychology begin to weave together into a larger pattern, a recognition that the underground has always served as more than just a physical space. It has functioned as a repository for humanity's deepest memories, fears, hopes, and possibilities, a place where the ordinary rules of time and space seem suspended, where the past and future meet in an eternal present of stone and silence. The underground cities of Cappadocia still echo with the footsteps of people who lived their entire lives in deliberate darkness. The catacombs of Rome still preserve the art and faith of communities that found in death a gateway to life. The wartime tunnels of Vietnam and London still whisper of human resilience in the face of overwhelming destruction. The subway systems and underground networks of modern cities still demonstrate our persistent belief that civilization requires hidden foundations, spaces of retreat, preservation, and renewal that exist parallel to the obvious structures of surface life. Each underground space we have explored carries within it the same essential message: that human survival and human flourishing depend not only on what we build upward toward the light, but on what we preserve downward in the darkness. Knowledge, community, faith, and hope all require protection from the forces that would destroy them. And throughout history, that protection has most often been found by going deeper. By creating spaces that exist outside the reach of armies and weather, governments and catastrophes, the forgetting that comes with time and the violence that comes with human ambition. The myths of underground realms that we explored at the beginning of our journey now seem less like fantasies and more like memories, collective recollections of humanity's long relationship with the depths, stories of gods and spirits in underground kingdoms may preserve actual experiences of communities that lived for generations in carved stone cities. Tales of emergence from underground worlds may echo real migrations from subterranean shelters to surface settlements. Legends of hidden knowledge and lost civilizations may reflect the actual preservation of wisdom in chambers and libraries that we have not yet learned to find. But perhaps the most profound insight that emerges from our exploration of underground worlds is the recognition that we ourselves are underground creatures. Our most important thoughts happen below the threshold of conscious awareness. Our deepest connections to each other occur through invisible networks of empathy and understanding. Our greatest innovations emerge from unconscious processes that we cannot directly control or even observe. Like the ancient inhabitants of Daring Q, we live most of our lives in spaces that cannot be seen from the surface. In the hidden chambers of memory, imagination, love, and hope that make us human, the underground serves as a mirror for the human condition. Reminding us that we are creatures of depth as well as surface, that our most essential qualities exist not in what we display to the world, but in what we preserve in the hidden chambers of our hearts and minds. The stone cities beneath the earth reflect the invisible cities within ourselves. The vast networks of connection and possibility that support our conscious lives, while remaining largely unknown to us. As we stand at the threshold between underground and surface, between the journey we have taken and the daily life to which we return, we carry with us a new awareness of the depths that surround and sustain us. We know now that beneath every step we take lies a world of human story. Chambers carved by desperate hands, tunnels that connected communities across centuries, spaces where faith and knowledge were preserved through the darkest periods of human history. We understand now that the impulse to go underground, to seek protection, preservation, and renewal in the depths, is not a retreat from life, but a fundamental aspect of life itself. Like seeds that must be buried in dark earth before they can grow toward light, like roots that must extend deep into hidden soil before trees can reach toward sky. Human civilization requires underground foundations that most people never see, but upon which everything depends. The next time you walk through a city street, pause for a moment and consider what lies beneath your feet. Not just sewers and subway lines, but layers of human choosing. Generations of people who decided that the most important things in life, safety, community, knowledge, faith, required protection in the depths. Consider that beneath the obvious geography of your daily routine lies another geography entirely, a hidden landscape of human hope and human memory that extends far deeper than you might imagine. And perhaps, in quiet moments when the surface world feels too demanding or too fragile, you might remember the underground cities, the carved chambers where people found ways to live fully human lives away from the chaos above. The tunnels that connected isolated communities into networks of mutual support. The libraries and temples and meeting halls where knowledge and wisdom were preserved through the darkest times. And you might recognize that within yourself lie similar spaces, chambers of resilience and renewal that no external circumstance can touch, underground territories of the soul where your most essential self waits patiently for you to remember the way down, and the way back up, and the recognition that both directions are necessary for a complete human life.